Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening, good morning from wherever you're joining. On behalf of C40, I would like to welcome you to the webinar today. It's absolutely pertinent that we are here today, especially after post-COP, to discuss a very pertinent issue on coal. It's based out of a report that C40 published with several partners that are here with us actually today, ASER and CREA and others, to talk about how we can actually develop coal-free cities and make an economic and health case for a clean energy revolution. Henri, can you move to the next slide? So the way we have structured the program today is we will actually go into the report and discuss the projections of coal air pollution in Indian cities in the next decade, which is going to be presented by Sunil Dhaya from CREA and Vinuta Gopal from ASER. And then we're going to have a panel discussion and hear directly from city officials from Delhi and Bangalore. They're going to talk, we're going to have like an open discussion on what they think have their plans been to actually move to cleaner energy, looking at different sectors. So we're hoping that we can cover mobility and energy, two very prime sectors that contribute to GHG emissions. And then we will move on to our next session, which will focus on, how as a follow-up and building upon these two, how Indian cities can actually accelerate coal phase out and support the green transition. Henri, next slide. So just, before we start, the webinar today and the various discussions, just wanted to give a little bit of an overview of C40. So what is C40? C40 brings together the world's top political leadership to work on climate action. We focus on cities. We represent about 97 cities, which is close to about 700 million citizens across the world. That is almost about 25% of the global economy. So that's the strength of the C40 network. And we all know why we need to focus on cities. Cities, almost, there's fast urbanization happening. There are reports that anticipate that, out of, 7 people will be living in cities. Cities are also important because they form, economic hubs. So people move to cities for economic opportunities, which also sets sort of the platform for understanding how some of these discussions can actually build into a clean, and green and just transition and lead to a greener economy. So what can we do to create jobs through some of these transitions? So, C40 actually works through political leadership and commitment. We have seen through all our cities that how an agenda that is, integrated into political manifestos can really have a very, long-lasting impact and drive change on ground. We believe that cities can learn from each other. We have, we really leverage our strength of peer-to-peer city learning. And, we often, we arrange these kind of discussions even with cities to understand what kind of roadmaps they are constructing on, clean energy and mobility and other pertinent topics that lead to, a climate action plan. The third thing is that we are very data-driven. We believe, as an example of this report that's been launched, which looked at, almost 61 cities across 27 countries. And the data that they looked at was between 2020 to 2030 to build this case on why, what is sort of the impact of coal plants and why this transition is critical, building on the health and economic impacts. The other thing that happens when we talk about coal is that often coal plants are located outside the administrative boundaries of cities. And, and often they are not in the jurisdiction of the cities. So it's an important sort of discussion to have that how can cities actually really impact this, discourse on the clean energy transition and the phase down of coal. An important sort of, goals that are coming and aligning to the commitment India recently made at COP26. So with that, I would like to actually invite our first, panelists of our first session, which is Sunil Dhaya, who is an analyst with Center for Research on Clean, Energy and Clean Air, and Vinuta Gopal, the CEO at ASER, who are going to talk about the projections and some data that's, that really lays the case for the transition to clean energy.
Thank you. Thanks, Shruti. Should I start?
Yes, please. Sunil, just before you, sorry, give me a minute. So, sorry, just a couple of housekeeping. We would request that if, you have questions, you can please put them on the chat box. We do have a Q&A at the end, but if during the session, you feel you have any questions, for any particular panelist, please do note them down. And we would request, for you to, just like, keep on mute and let us know if you have any issues in signing up. Thank you. Sunil, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Shruti, for that brilliant introduction to what C40 is and what we have been trying to do by coming together in terms of bringing in this data and putting this data out there in public domain, as well as for the policymakers to kind of work on. I'll start with very just a sec. Okay. So why we have been speaking about coal and why is it important to speak about coal? It's very prominent from the fact that 0.3 degree of 1 degree already warming which has happened is because of coal, and that's why it's very, very important for us to look into what coal has been doing and what it can do in the decade to come, and how can we stop that. The prominence of coal is also shown through different research papers and research reports by multiple groups, and it has been put out outright there, saying that phasing out coal from the electric sector is the single most important step to be in line with the 1.5 degree scenario. And if you don't restrict coal, there is no way we can restrict the global warming to 1.5 degree. That's everyone who's been working on climate change, on public health, on energy sector, everyone is aware about the fact that it is very, very important and integral for us to restrict the global warming beyond below 1.5 degree, and coal will play a major role in that. Now, coming to the entire COP discussion and what's been happening nationally in terms of coal development, retirements, as well as other capacity which is in proposal stage. Before COP26, India had never signaled that there will be restrictions on coal. What we have seen over last 2 years, be it in the coal-based power generation sector or coal mining sector, there has been a lot of new money which has been pumped in. Asis will surely speak about the finances later on. But what I would like to highlight here is if we go by the plans which we had before or pre-COP26, India's coal-based capacity would have grown by 20% by 2030. Whereas to be in line with the 1.5 degree scenario, it had to be reduced by 22%, and that's where we stood when we went into COP. And multiple research reports have put it out, and various commentators, campaigners have also been speaking about India's commitment at the COP and whether that aligns in the larger framework of phasing down or phasing out coal-based power plants. What we have seen is out of the 5 commitments which India made, one of the major commitments which can be interpreted in different ways was that India will have 500 gigawatt of renewable energy installed capacity by 2030. We at KRIA did an analysis of how does that translate into actual energy generation for every year from now onwards till to 2030. And if we are able to, like, this is a caveat that if we are able to install 500 gigawatt of renewable energy by 2030, it would mean that India's installed coal-based power generation will peak around 2025, and the actual generation from coal-based power plants will peak in and around 2026 or 2027, like 2027. And after that, there will be a sharp decline in the coal-based power generation in the electricity mix of the country. And that's obviously next year, India as well as other countries have to submit revised NDCs. But before that, this is a very, very strong signal which India had sent at the international community. Now it has to translate into national policies, clear-cut guidelines, which can tell the financier or investors in the coal sector that you do whatever. If you are investing any new single rupee into the coal sector, that's not going to be as return worthy as it would be in the renewable energy sector or any other sector. And there is very limited scope beyond mid of this decade for coal-based power generation, and the share is going to decline. This research is available on our website. I'll share the link later on. The earlier slides portrays that it's very important and integral for us to work on coal or reduce coal's contribution in the larger energy as well as electricity save for the country as well as globally. Why we focus on cities now is because, as Shruti mentioned, that cities are the hub which are developing very fast, and 7 out of 10 people will be living in these cities, which also means that 2/3 of global energy use even right now is in these cities. And particularly for India, when we consume this electricity, most of our electricity is again consumed by the big city centers or the industries, and 71% of this grid-based electricity in India comes from coal-based power plants. Now, if all these coal-based power plants, yes, they are distributed across different states and different geographies, but if we focus on only 5 cities which are under C40 network in India, about 55% of the capacity lies within 500 kilometers of these 5 cities, and that's where the opportunity lies. These cities which are already part of this progressive network can influence these nearby or neighboring regions to move away from coal. And how do we do it, when do we do it, and what helps us in doing it is the kind of conversation which we are going to have through these kind of discussions in the second session of the today's webinar. Talking about the results of the study, what we did was we basically looked at the coal consumption at these all these different power plants in India, and we modeled that using the meteorological parameters as well as simulating meteorological models, and quantified incremental air pollution at different locations. And out of those, these 5 cities were of key interest to us, and we have found that about there is at least 2 to 5% of average annual pollution or PM 2.5 in these cities comes from coal-based power plants. Obviously, the percentage varies from city to city and from time to time of the year. It can also reach to about 15-20% at different times. Now, when I say that there is an incremental air pollution because of coal burning at coal-based power plants in different parts of the country, and that incremental air pollution impacts populations living in these C40 cities, that technically means that when they breathe, when people breathe this air with the incremental air pollution caused by coal-based power plants, there are health impacts. And just one parameter of those health impacts is projected or depicted in this slide. And that means or that displays that in Calcutta every year there are 2,200 deaths, premature deaths because of coal burning in and around Kolkata city or in the country. And this number of deaths can increase by 1,000 more if all the coal-based power plants which are in pipeline are being built. Similarly, for Delhi as well, the number of deaths, premature deaths, which might be attributed to coal-based power generation are 330, and it can increase by 250 more if new coal-based power plants which are in pipeline or under construction stage are been built. And that says that all these cities have huge health impacts from coal-based power generation right now, and if the plans of expansion goes ahead, the impact or the burden is going to increase further. Now, just to depict how does these power plants in different locations impact the air quality in nearby regions, these are few of the modeling videos which we have made. And this shows that there are power plants in and around Calcutta which emits these pollutants, which reacting with the meteorology travels in different directions. And depending on time of the year, time of the day, the concentration of PM 2.5 released by these power plants varies, and it impacts a huge region, bigger region around these cities and also these cities. Similarly, the left one is for Calcutta. We have similar simulations for Delhi and other cities as well. Links for the videos will also be shared later on. But the other thing which I would like to point out is that we have, while we were doing this study, we have concentrated our focus on people living within these cities. But obviously, the health impacts are not just within the cities; they are beyond the cities as well, and that's where these other regions beyond these cities also have huge health impacts. So the representation in this representation of health impacts in this slide or this presentation would be limited to just these 5 cities and not cannot be interpreted for the entire country. For the entire country, the numbers are going to be much larger. Now, talking about the incremental health impacts over the next decade, we found that there will be at least 52,000 premature deaths because of operation of the existing coal-based power plants, existing coal-based power plants or the proposed coal-based power plants in these 5 cities till 2030. There might be more than 31,000 preterm births, 5,700 new asthma cases, 48 or 49,000 years of life with disabilities in people living in these cities, and there will be about 47,000 asthma emergency room visits. That's only because of operation of these coal-based power plants in these cities. Now, I would like to add one very real-world and practical example of how these cities are impacted by coal-based pollution and how they have control over reducing that pollution or don't have control over reducing the pollution. We all have been talking about air pollution in Delhi NCR since last 5 years. Obviously, the entire country is polluted, but that's the area which has got most attention of the media, of the policymakers and everyone. And even in this region, there are these 11 to 13 power plants which were supposed to install pollution control technologies by 2017, according to a notification which was brought out in 2015 December. Apart from a couple of power plants, Dadri, few units at Dadri and Mahatma Gandhi power plant in Haryana, none of the power plants have installed this pollution control technology, and they're still operating without having the appropriate or state-of-the-art pollution control technologies. So that's something which we need to think about and speak about and force our policymakers to kind of work on that. But apart from reducing pollution from the existing power plant, nobody is talking about additional sources which will be added in this critically polluted region. There's a power plant called Khurja power plant, which is under construction, which is just 60 or 70 kilometer aerial distance away from Delhi NCR. And if that power plant is constructed, there will be additional burden on Delhi NCR as well as other regions. And this is just one example. There are many other cities in India where there are these new coal-based power plants which are not required, which are polluting, are coming up. And that's where I think the discussion about whether Delhi can put up presentation or representation to say that we don't want this power plant, and if this power plant comes in our neighborhood, it will negate all the efforts we are making to reduce air pollution levels or move towards cleaner air. So these are the kind of discussions which we might be having in the following sessions, and we should have. The other thing I would I won't go into the economics of it. I think Ashish will cover that. So I'll stop there. I'll request Vinuta to kind of speak a little bit more about how the health discussions have been happening in these cities, what's missing, and how can we move forward with. Vinuta, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sunil. I think Sunil's covered a lot of the data on both, even on the health impacts from coal power plants. So I'm going to limit myself to highlighting some aspects that I think are important for us to consider. The first is that numbers often don't are reaching a stage where they don't shock us, but the health impacts that we need to consider, not just on the mortality side, but also on morbidity, which is basically the health impacts of air pollution now are being researched, and there is enough evidence to show that in addition to impacts on life, how long we live, in addition to that, it's also affecting the health, the productivity of individuals, affecting child learning, possibly affecting emotional health, even cases of dementia and so on are being linked to the quality of air we breathe. So I think that it's becoming very apparent, and there are sufficient sort of global studies which now are also being conducted within India itself and in the cities that we are speaking about here, that the health impact on individuals and especially on children and vulnerable individuals is extremely significant. The result of this is also that the productivity of these individuals then reduce. So, you know, a person could be very sick and therefore unable to work. So not only does that affect the productivity where the person goes to and provides provides their time in another company, but also if they were dependent on their own personal labor to earn money, then that affects their ability to earn. So the health implications on livelihood and the economy of the country are both significant. There has been a study also by the Clean Air Fund, which has shown that almost 95 billion, that the impact of this is almost 95 billion on the Indian GDP. And this is also a result of lost work days in the country on account of air pollution. So I think one of the issues for us to consider, and I'm sure the people working on the city plans are going to bring this up, is that what we've seen in Delhi and what we're going to see in all of these cities, like in the sort of videos Sunil shared, is that while the city is impacted and significantly, it's also an air shed. So the pollution also comes in from the outside. And it is not sufficient to deal with only the sources of pollution within the city, but also talk about the pollution sources outside the city. And Delhi, for example, does have the Commission on Air Quality, which is trying to deal with this situation. But what is, for example, I think one of the questions for us is that a model for other air sheds as well? Because we need a coordinated approach that goes beyond cities. And at the moment, the way in which city air pollution is being dealt with are largely city action plans. And within the city, there definitely is a lot to be done. But at the same time, as Sunil said, how is a city going to actually talk about pollution sources from the outside? Would it have a say in a power plant's location? And so on and so forth. So I think the question of how cities deal with the airshed becomes significant. I also think that on the health front, there is a lot of talk about mortality, but the implications on the morbidity end are also very significant, and a much greater awareness needs to be raised on the implications of the quality of life for individuals. And it's very clear that the COVID has sort of shown us what the public health situation is. And the dire need for addressing the costs of public health. And air quality is exacerbating the need for much greater spending on public health. So we need to address air pollution, even if we want to also reduce our costs on the public health front. So I will stop there and looking forward to the discussion ahead.
Thank you, Vinuta and Sunil. That was a very interesting, discussion and highlight on very data-driven facts on, how it's critical for us to look at air pollution from the angle of health and also the economic aspect of it. So I'm just going to turn the discussion actually to a little bit on sort of on the aspects of what cities can actually do. And we're very sort of lucky to be joined by Mr. Vinod Kumar Yadav, who's the Deputy Commissioner from the Transport Department, Delhi, and Mr. KP Rudrappa, who is the Managing Director of Karnataka Renewable Energy Development Limited. If I may start with Mr. Rudrappa, I wanted to, are you online, Mr. Rudrappa? If I can request you to please put your video on so that the participants can also see you, if that's possible. So, Mr. Rudrappa,
am I audible?
Yes, yes, you're audible. Thank you so much for joining us. And just a note to everyone who is participating that this is a public webinar and we are recording the session. So if you have any, if you want to go back to any of the data and statistics and questions, please do, access the recording. So Mr. Rudrapa, I wanted to come to you to understand, and if you can give us a little overview of, what is Karnataka state doing with respect to, accelerating renewable energy, not only in the state, but cities, and especially if there are specific efforts underway in Bangalore. We'd be very keen to understand how the city is and the state are working towards a transition to cleaner energy.
Okay. Good evening. Before going ahead, I would like to say a few words about the CREDEL, Karnataka Renewable Energy Development Limited. It's a 25 years old organization and it's a nodal agency to promote RE projects in the state. And so you may be aware that Karnataka is leading in front of RE 200 megawatt of installed capacity. And the total, the installed capacities are 30,000 megawatt, out of which 50% is coming from RE only in Karnataka. And as of now, we stand in number one place in the country, followed by other states. So basically, out of this 15,200 megawatt, again 50% is contributed by solar, and another 30% is contributed by wind, and rest by way of biogas projects and waste energy projects, cogen projects, and things like that. Basically, given by Government of India, and it was around 6,000 megawatt for the last previous this thing, and we have crossed it. We have crossed around. We have touched around 7,000 megawatts. And you just to come back to your question. Anyway, we have a issue in cities like Bangalore. We have a major city like Gulbarga, Bangalore, Mangalore, Hubli, Dharwad. These are the major cities in Karnataka. Just to fan out all these RE projects in the state, what we have done, we have restricted, every district should have maximum 200 megawatt of RE projects. That is what we are bringing up a new RE policy, which is going to focus more on RE projects only.
Thank you, Mr. Rudrapa. I'll just come back to you, with the second question actually. But I just wanted to move to Mr. Sunil. Mr. Sunil, transportation is a very, the second probably most important sector that can really impact the whole transition, to clean sort of a climate and the reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And Delhi has been really sort of leading the way in its EV campaign that is very prominent and very strategic. So it'll be great if just to understand from you, a little bit on what you think. How do you connect sort of the mobility and the greenhouse gas emissions dialogue, and what were some of the key triggers that made Delhi, go on such a, path of such an intensive transition to, clean mobility options? Hello, Mr. Yadav, can you hear?
Hello.
Yes.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. So especially in respect of transport department, we are continuously trying to increase the share of electric mobility in the transportation sector of Delhi. So for that, we have taken many steps. Like in 2020, electric vehicle policy Delhi was launched, and that policy is considered very progressive in many terms. So under this policy, we are taking many factors, like we are providing subsidy to different categories of vehicles like e-cart and e-auto, e-cars and vehicles. So till now, about 36 crore rupees has been disbursed under subsidy ahead in the NCT of Delhi. Except to this, GNCT of Delhi also providing interest subvention of 5% on the electric vehicles in the partnership of the CESL, which is a joint venture of Government of India PSUs. For that, also public, we are trying to increase the public charging infrastructure all over the Delhi. Until now, we have installed, we are able to install about 250 to 300 public charging points all across the Delhi. Except to this, we are also in the process to launch a campaign or a scheme, like in that we are going to provide 6,000 rupees subsidy for installation of charging point at the premise of the consumer. So that is in the pipeline. Except to this, Delhi government is also trying to strengthen the public transportation, and in that respect also, we are focusing on induction of electric buses especially. So by February, we will be able to induct about 3,000 buses in DTC and about 3,000 buses in DIMS, and about 1,300 electric buses will be inducted by February probably. So by except to this, transport department is trying to create an conducive environment in the field of electric mobility. So we are also working on the aggregator guidelines, which will help this aggregator like Swiggy, Zomato, and other players in the field. So and in that guidelines also, we will try to give a platform to these players, so that they can readily shift to the electric mobility, or certain portion of their fleet would be electric. Except to this, we are also try to strengthen our Delhi electric vehicle cell, so that a concentrated or focused approach or focused work can be done in the field of the electric mobility. Except to this, we are also working on the conversion of the fleet government of vehicles in the all over Delhi to electric, so that its initial impetus could be given to the field of electric mobility. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Yadav. I'm going to come back to you just for a second question, but Mr. Rudrapal, just coming back to you, initiatives around renewable energy are often not, seen by citizens as connected to air pollution, right? I mean, people don't immediately make the connection, So has there been any thoughts on how, you can actually involve citizens in understanding the connection of, energy efficiency and renewable energy to air pollution, and also finding mechanisms of getting the citizens more involved in sort of the whole energy transition that you're working on in Karnataka. So has there been any thoughts on sort of looking at that aspect? And,
Actually, we have a separate cell in CREDEL, Karnataka Renewable Energy. That's called Energy Efficiency Management Cell, wherein we have a very qualified engineers. We are using all kinds. Am I audible now?
Yes, yes, you're audible.
Okay. See, basically, I mean, it's a very important step to involve citizens, in promoting this RE and telling them about the decarbonization, the importance and all. So what we are doing, we are now, campaigning. We are using all latest technologies. We are reaching out to all schools and colleges. We are conducting some awareness camps, and we are also reaching out to agriculture institutions where suppose if they use RE energy for even pump sets and all, what are the benefits? So we are reaching out to farmers through agriculture colleges, and we're reaching out to all the schools and colleges, either through online or even physically. Our officers will go there and explain to them. And also we are going to we conduct whenever there are some exhibitions, we do participate and tell importance about this transition and going for the importance of RE. So we are using all the technologies available, and henceforth we are also trying to make use of like connecting all the bigger schools, I mean, to throughout the state. That is our idea. Right now we are doing it only in metro places, but we want to spread this to across even up to taluka level, district level, something like that. We are already doing that.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm just going to come back again for one last question. I know you have a time shortage, but just give me 1 minute. I'm going to go to Mr. Vinod Yadav. Mr. Yadav, thank you so much for giving us an overview of all the measures that Delhi is putting in place on transportation. So again, a similar sort of a question to you that, how does one connect this, this whole strategy on e-mobility with air pollution, and, kind of, have you thought of any ways of, how they can become more mandatory, and also, has there been any data, any kind of data that has been collected post and before, prior and post, or are there any efforts to collect any data, or that's capturing on what kind of impact this transition can have, even if it's in in a smaller pilot stage, that could be then communicated to citizens for them to understand the whole importance of e-mobility or clean mobility, and also using public transportation?
Yeah. Actually, Transport Department is in touch with the Environment Department, and we are striving to get such kind of data. But till now, they haven't this kind of data with them. But they are trying to bifurcate the data from the point of view that emission level, how the transportation is contributing in the AQI index, how the Parali and these kind of problems contributing in the AQI index. So we are trying to get such kind of data, but till now there is no segregation, or there is no, we can say that post-mortem of this AQI. So still we are trying to shift to the electric mobility, and that definitely will contribute in the reducing the air pollution in the Delhi. So because some studies are saying that transportation is contributing 20 to 25% in the air AQI levels. So but there is no concrete supporting to this data. But if it is true, then electric mobility and shifting to the electric field will definitely contribute in the reduction of that air pollution. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Yadav. I'm just going to go to my last question round, and starting with Mr. Rudrappa. Mr. Rudrappa, our colleagues presented this study around coal, and the impacts on sort of the economy and health. And, also with India's, sort of commitment towards coal phase down, just wanted to understand, your thoughts on what should be done, and what sort of should be done in general by India. And, especially, is there any critical steps that Karnataka is planning to take, in the near future on sort of looking at how they can phase down coal?
So basically, I think you also know about Government of India plans to reduce coal fossil fuels and to increase RE capacity. Basically, Honorable Prime Minister has declared in Glasgow meet, and also this hydrogen mission also Government of India has launched. Basically, the target of the Government of India is to by 2030 to bring down usage of fossil fuels. So for that, what Karnataka is taking step to match Government of India's targets. We are coming out with a renewable energy policy 2021-26, wherein we are going to give a lot of thrust on basically hybrid parks. See, what is happening is now, though there is a penetration of RE projects to reduce usage of fossil fuels, but there is a problem because it is not a firm power. The power is not available around the clock. Like solar, you get only during daytime, and wind you get during night time. There is an issue. But of course, there is a solution that is we can go for the hybrid parks, where it's a mix of both solar and wind, and with a battery storage. But again, there is a challenge. As of now, the battery storage is little costlier. But I definitely hope with the technology coming in, maybe in a year or two, the total by the penetration of REV will be more, and gradually the fossil fuels will be reduced. The coal will be reduced, and thereby we are going to meet the Government of India target, the global target also. So that is at that direction we are working. We are bringing out that new policy, wherein we are giving more thrust for the battery storage project. We are giving more thrust for the hybrid parks to solve these major issues. Apart from that, you must have heard about the Honorable Prime Minister's hydrogen mission, so green hydrogen mission. So already many big companies have shown interest, like Adani, Ambani. They've already declared their investments, and in that direction, Karnataka is going to come up with a hydrogen policy, wherein we are going to support investors in terms of putting up electrolyzer plants and putting up green hydrogen plants. So we are working on a green hydrogen policy. We are working on developing hybrid parks, and we are working on battery storage projects. So all these things put together, will increase the RE penetration, fossil fuels. Apart from that, we are also, there is a Government of India scheme wherein, Kusum Component C, where we can, it's a kind of a solarization of agriculture feeders. Right now, all these farmers are, drawing power from the, the grids. So we are, as per the Government of India direction, we are going to develop these, solar parks. They will feed to these agriculture feeders. Like that, we are implementing, many projects which will help to increase the penetration of RE capacity and reduce fossil fuels. So these are the many things which we are working. I hope this will definitely help in reduction of the carbon emission. This is what is our plans as of now.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rudrapal. I think you really gave us a very strategic overview of sort of the dynamic of supply and demand, and how it's very important to look at, what sort of demand is there, and then also address supply and how they go together. And it's not just one straight answer, but probably requires, sort of multiple measures to be put in place over time.
Because it's very complex. See what happens. Suddenly, we all know that usage of fossil fuels, brings the carbon dioxide emission, and it's very harmful and things like that. But though we know that, suddenly we can't reduce usage of fossil fuels, because we do not have all these RE projects do not give the round the clock power. So we have to go for hybrid parks and battery storage, which are expensive as of now. Yeah. And even the hydrogen, green hydrogen also, as of now, the technology is premature and it's very expensive. And though we can use it in steel plants and ammonia plants and fertilizer plants, so they're all in the nascent stage. Definitely the usage of coal will come down. The transition will happen in a fast pace in the coming 1 or 2 years. That's what I foresee. And as the Karnataka, we are working towards all that new develop, new technologies.
Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Rudrapal. We really appreciate it. And I think it was great to hear from a state perspective, and also have like sort of a, Delhi, which is between a state and a city, to kind of talk about what efforts they are doing, so it was, and you really kind of touched on all the different aspects that are critical to look at in terms of this transition. So it's not an easy answer, but it's great that, we're looking at it. So thank you so much for your time. We definitely look forward to continuing to engage with you.
Sorry, there was some connectivity issue in the beginning. I couldn't join on time.
No problem. Thank you. No, thank you so much. We sincerely appreciate your time. And I would like to invite our last, panelist, Mr. Ashish Fernandez. So Ashish is the CEO at Climate Risk Horizon and another very critical partner for us for this report. So Ashish, over to you to talk about, the whole acceleration and kind of looking at it from the angle of how it can really support the green transition and the economy powering. So over to you, Ashish.
Thanks, Shruti, and thanks to the other panelists as well for their interventions. It's really good to be part of this. So I just have a few broad points before I go on to the specifics. Just by way of introduction, Climate Risk Horizons is a think tank that specializes in financial and data analysis to guide decision-making in the climate space. We've been set up about 2 years ago, and we've done a series of different analyses, including looking at what are the opportunity costs borne by asset managers and mutual funds on account of their investments in the coal sector. And we've also looked at the specific financial costs and benefits from retiring old coal plants across India, with in-depth focus on Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu at the moment, and we plan to expand that to other states. So I just want to make a couple of broad points if I go into some specifics. One is that, as was touched upon by Sunil, there is obviously concern right now about the levels of air pollution, given what we see happening around us every day and every year for the last several years. It's important to stress that this is only going to get worse at the moment because there are significant plans to continue expanding coal power right now. There's about 30 gigawatts of new coal power plants under construction. Many of those are in the air sheds of the cities that we're talking about. In addition to that, there's another 27 gigawatts that are proposed and at various stages of securing permits. Obviously, these will add to the air pollution load nationally, and yes, in cities as well. So that's just by way of context to keep that in the background. A very common question is, okay, what powers do cities have to actually control what's happening outside the city? And it is unfortunately a problem that, yes, powers are limited. The city powers in Indian systems, Delhi being an exception, but other cities, the powers are relatively limited. But there are still things that cities can do that can control what's happening outside the city and reduce the amount of air pollution being generated outside the city that then flows into the city. And I'll go into that in some detail in the next couple of slides. Honorine, if you can move to the next slide. Yeah, so I think the first and most important is to recognize that data should be driving our decisions all the time. And so making sure that we institutionalize public reporting of city emissions and make that publicly available and easily accessible, I think is a key baseline. That's something that all cities need to be doing. That allows us to then set targets for sectors. So 2, 5, 10-year targets to progressively reduce emissions so that we're not talking only about a long-term net zero goal of 2050 or 2070, but we're talking about in the next 2 years, 3 years, what are we going to do? I think cities by themselves, city governments by themselves have a lot of control over their own properties. So that's where we should be starting. All offices under city control, educational institutions, hospitals, other buildings. What are the things that we can be doing there? So increasing energy efficiency is the most easiest low-hanging fruit, frankly. So how do we manage that cooling load? We know that the cooling load is going to get higher and higher as the effects of climate change make themselves felt. So managing that cooling load is going to pay dividends, not just in terms of reducing costs, but also in terms of controlling pollution. Efficient fans and ACs, insulation and air sealing, reflective roofing is something that there's a lot of development going on in India right now. These need to be looked at. These are things that cities can actually do for relatively low cost and significant payback. Maximizing the renewable energy deployment on all municipality structures and properties, open parking lots. Most city governments have a significant land bank and property bank. So maximizing that RE deployment, I think, is going to be key. We've already heard from Delhi and both Karnataka as well about the efforts to electrification. And I know a lot of cities, even Bombay, is doing a lot on that. But that should be that we need to really try and scale that up and expand that to all municipality vehicle fleets, so car fleets as well as bus fleets. I think there's another segment of opportunities in terms of using the purchasing power to leverage the purchasing power of cities. Excuse me, leverage the purchasing power of cities. So, for example, set targets for city contractors. If you want a city contract, you need to have a plan to actually phase out your use of diesel and generation sets, etc., in applications where clean alternatives already exist, where electrification is possible. Incentivize contractors to basically do that if they want to continue securing contracts. Next slide. Obviously all the cities that we're talking about are still expanding, some more than others. There are significant large new constructions coming on place. Some cities have in place already stipulations that there has to be some amount of renewables deployment on that new construction, I think that we can look at ways to strengthen that and make that more mandatory. At the moment, I think it's largely advisory, and there are many ways for developers to escape that. We need to be a little bit more proactive in terms of ensuring that large housing societies, etc., that are coming up have space for RE deployment as well as for battery storage increasingly, because we know that battery storage is going to become cheaper. And is already, in fact, at a grid level, it's already on par with new coal construction. We know it's going to the cost is going to come down. I think the most important is looking at how you can leverage the city's bulk purchasing power for electricity to demand that power comes from renewable sources. So it's what I'm talking about is a kind of open access for renewable energy, where basically you the city tells the DISCOM that we want our load to be met entirely from renewables. When I say our load, I mean the city government purchases. So all city purchases for buildings, whatever the city governments uses, that needs to come from renewable energy. That involves obviously involving the state government and involves the distribution company. But I think that provides a potential win-win opportunity, not just because it gives a boost to renewable energy, but it will help to lower the city's power costs as well. Because we know that renewable energy now is cheaper than coal. We know that even in some cases, when you take into account the need for storage and grid balancing, even then it's still coming out cheaper than coal in many places. So I think that's an opportunity that we need to look at in terms of how do we save money for city administrations, as well as how will that boost renewable energy. So I think 100% goal for all city power. When I say city power, I don't mean the entire consumption of the whole city, but I mean the consumption of the city administration, the city government for its users. That can be renewables by 2030 quite easily if this kind of open access is explored. And I think the last point is the most key, but also the most difficult, which is basically advocating with state governments in which the city is located to reduce coal and fossil burning more largely through a switch to clean energy. Because like I said earlier, the coal power plants that are coming up outside the city, unfortunately, those impacts are going to be felt in the city and by the city's residents itself. So cities do have a role that even extends beyond their boundaries. So advocating with state governments to ensure that we speed up the energy transition as much as possible, I think is key. Yeah, that's it. Looking forward to discussion and questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ashish, for that. It was very useful to actually, summarize sort of the actions that cities can take, and also sort of, the collaboration between the cities and the state. So really appreciate this, and I think it's a great way to end this discussion. We don't have, a lot of time for questions, but maybe we can take one or two questions if we have. I don't see actually any questions. So, with that, I think maybe we can end the discussion today. So I would like to thank all the panelists for their time and all the effort that has gone into this report, and especially, Mr. Rudrappa and Mr. Yadav for coming in and talking about, the whole dynamic of state and city, and, sort of specific, roadmaps that they have developed on energy and mobility, two very critical sectors that help in sort of the decarbonization. So I do see actually one question quickly, and I'll take that. It's for Ashish, and then we'll wrap up. Ashish, how can cities pay a different electricity tariff when tariffs are determined at the state level?
Yeah, so this is key. So under the open access regulation, that large consumers, usually industrial consumers, large consumers, commercial and industrial consumers, they can pay. Open access basically allows you to enter into a contract directly with a provider, rather than just receiving electricity from the DISCOM. So what I'm suggesting is that cities, because they have political power, more political power, and they have bulk purchasing power, they can enter into, just like an industry might enter into a contract with an RE provider who provides electricity, cities can also explore that. And that will allow them to then, that will in many cases allow them to reduce their total power bill, or at least have a slight differential that can actually generate savings, given that we're talking about such large quantities.
Thank you, Ashish. I think that was a very interesting question to actually wrap up on, because it is sort of a very critical point on how cities can actually work on open access and kind of look at their sort of mandate on looking at the transition. So thank you everyone for your time, and thank you once again the panelists. And all of these, the report is available actually on our website, which includes more examples of how cities are taking actions that can provide context and strategies for people who are looking at the transition. You can also access the methodology and stream the videos that were played as well. And if you need any further information, please feel free to get in touch directly with Honorine, who has been critical, a team person in sort of structuring the report and authoring it. And thank you once again for your time, and please have a great day, great evening. And we look forward to staying in touch and work, and talking about these pertinent issues as a post-COP26 follow-up. Thank you.